Good evening, everyone. I'm Berthany McDermott. Thanks so much for joining us. House members can expect a resolution to be brought to Parliament soon for approval for the government to borrow millions of dollars as Hurricane Dorian has thrown a wrench in the government's fiscal plan. This from Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance Peter Turnquest today as he outlined the fiscal strategy report. Additionally, he says the government also intends to source funding from domestic banks.
To finance the increased deficit position, the government will table new resolutions to Parliament for approval to borrow $507.9 million, which is the $540.5 million adjustment in the fiscal deficit for 2019-2020, net of the payouts from the Caribbean Catastrophic Risk Insurance Facility of $12.9 million and the $20 million earmarked from the Extinguished Dormant Account Fund.
The fiscal deficit then is now estimated to stand at $677.5 million, or 5.3% of the GDP for the fiscal year. This as the initial approved estimate stood at $177 million, or 1% of the GDP. The report, he further outlined, notes that capital expenditure is expected to increase by $100 million. In total, aggregate expenditure is anticipated to increase by $302.6 million, which will take the figure to $3,073.1 million as compared to the $2,765 million in the approved estimate for the fiscal year 2019-2020.
As such, the projected revenue yield for 2019-2020 has been adjusted downward from the approved estimates of $2,628 million to $2,395.6 million. On the expenditure front, the government expects to spend an additional $182.7 million in hurricane-related outlays, of which $82.7 million will be used to facilitate recurrent expenses such as landfill operations for cleanup, food assistance programs, and unemployment benefits, among others.
This, the DPM explained, all comes on the heels of the strongest hurricane ever reported in the region, which has forced the government to invoke the Exceptional Circumstances Clause 13, which allows the government to temporarily deviate from the fiscal plan because of the devastation by Dorian.
Under this clause, the Minister of Finance is mandated to bring to Parliament and the Fiscal Responsibility Council a fiscal adjustment plan which should outline the reason for the departure from the fiscal targets, which in this case is due to Hurricane Dorian. Measures to be taken to address the issues and a revised timeline for achieving compliance with the targets.
The government anticipates a return to fiscal compliance in the fiscal year 2024-2025. Attorneys for Canadian fashion mogul Peter Nygard has filed an urgent stay of execution pending appeal from Mr. Nygard on Monday. Mr. Nygard was found in contempt of court and sentenced to 90 days in prison just last Friday by Justice Ruth Bo Darville. A notice of motion for stay of execution pending appeal was filed, which asked the Court of Appeal to pause Nygard's proceedings in the Supreme Court and stop the execution order until a full appeal is heard. Attorney Coach Smith told our news team that the custodial sentence imposed on his client is unheard of, as Nygard was not in the Bahamas for sentencing. Mr. Smith went on to say he is baffled that Mr. Nygard was tried and sentenced in absentia, not having been personally served with the committal proceedings in accordance with mandatory rules of the Supreme Court, adding that he was equally surprised to hear of the draconian penalties imposed on him by a judge of first instance who made the various orders ex parte, that is, without Nygard present and without first hearing his challenges to these orders. Last week, Nygard was sentenced for contempt of court in a case concerning the theft of emails from advocacy group Save the Bays. He was ordered to turn himself over to police, pay a fine of $150,000, provide full apology for his non-appearance, and assuring the court he will discontinue using Save the Bays emails. Mr. Nygard did not comply in turning himself in, nor did he pay the fine. As a result, the judge ordered that he spends an additional 30 days in prison and fined $5,000 for each day the fine is unpaid. The Public Hospitals Authority signing a $3.6 million contract for Phase 1 and 2 of the Urgent and Emergency Care Project. The focus is on enhancements in infrastructure, systems, services, training and equipment at the Princess Margaret Hospital's Emergency Department, the Elizabeth Estates Clinic and South Beach Health Center. Inline Project Company Limited was selected as the contractor. PHA Board of Directors Chairman Julian Roll outlined some of the changes to be expected as improvement and expansion works will be done in phases.
The emergency room at the Princess Margaret Hospital is the busiest health facility in the country. The accident and emergency departments reports an average of 55,000 visits per year. The demands are only increasing. Operational studies suggest that as many as 41% of the cases were as a result of patients seeking care for non-urgent matters, or ESI level 4s and 5. In layman's terms, many of these cases seen in the emergency room are not medical emergencies, and these patients could have been seen by a physician in an urgent care facility. While emergency rooms serve those with life-threatening situations, an urgent care facility can treat those needing immediate but less serious care. Ensuring that patients receive the most appropriate health intervention in the shortest possible time will reduce delays to care and improve the patient's health prognosis. We know that lessening the patient load at the emergency room by improving access to urgent care services in communities where patients live and work not only improves service delivery to patients in those community-based centers, it improves service delivery in the hospital's emergency room.
Work will start in a matter of days for the new entry lobby, canopy, EMS area, and ambulance bay, as well as upgrades to building services, fire suppression, CCTV, and MEP. Health Minister Dr. Dwayne Sands assures that not only all the necessary measures have been taken so that services will not be impacted by the constructions, but that all aspects of healthcare delivery is provided.
We then realized that accident emergency needed to be dramatically improved, expanded, the ambience improved, basic equipment, supplies, staff, training of staff, etc. All of that has been going on already. We've been training staff now for the better part of a year in order to improve the services that they deliver. And so this has been an holistic approach to the experience that patients have, not just putting up some paint and some putty. We have considered all aspects of urgent and emergent care. We realize that we need to provide more options for urgent care in the community, but to improve the experience of patients at Princess Margaret Hospital, which is our flagship facility.
Construction's estimated to take 40 weeks. It's unknown when Phase 2 will begin, but it's expected to cost between $5 and $7 million. According to Environment Minister Ramal Ferreira, there is no contamination of groundwater thus far in Grand Bahama following the passage of Hurricane Dorian. This after reports circulating indicated otherwise. At the Rotary Club of Southeast Nassau, he gave an update on the speculation and assessment of the issue in Grand Bahama. An assessment, he says, is still ongoing and the all clear has not yet been given.
Monitoring wells were dug, cleaned out, and properly installed under the supervision of field technician and affiliate engineer. And then groundwater samples were taken and sent to an EPA certified laboratory. And so far, all of the groundwater testing has indicated that there's no contamination of the groundwater that they've been able to find thus far. But I don't think we're out of the woods yet, because testing is ongoing and additional wells will be installed, because we have to make sure that any hydraulic head that's on its way down, that we account for that.
As it relates to protecting the environment from oil spills, Minister Ferreira says the compendium of bills presented in the House of Assembly today protects the environment against oil spills.
We tabled in the House of Assembly and read for the second time for debate today the environmental suite of legislation, which introduces the Environmental Protection and Planning Act, which is the equivalent of our Environmental Protection Act. It introduces a Department of Environment, Planning and Protection, which will be charged with enforcing environmental regulations, and it allows for the minister to sign any number of regulations into law that pertain for example, oil spills and the kind of oil drilling that you're foreshadowing.
Back in September, Health Minister Dr. Dwayne Sands said that from a health perspective, he assumes all groundwater in Grand Bahama and Abaco was contaminated as a result of Hurricane Dorian. You're watching JCN News. Stay with us.
This segment of the news was brought to you by Alive.